Well, I think it's
Hi,
great
everyone.
to be up here, Gerrit.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Great to be in
And
Helsinki.
I'm excited about this interview, but before we kick off, let's check in the room here. How many in the room are using a streaming music service of any kind? So, a vast majority, but actually, that's not a normal response. That's because we're in a group of geeks here, really. And the reality is we're just at the beginning of what I think is a huge industry shift. But before we go into all that good stuff, let's tackle some near-term realities. We live in a choppy and volatile stock market, and we just had some news from you recently. You want to expand on that, Gerrit?
Yeah, so basically, it's all about timing, and I think a lot of you have heard about our IPO plans and that we postponed them. So despite, we actually had good and qualified interest from investors, but there was some sentiments in the market, specifically to our sector. Pandora's stock down significantly, some news about Netflix that affected the stock. And so obviously that affects your timing, and so we decided to postpone.
Well, I think with great businesses, the longer you can stay private, the better. So really good news also from many perspectives.
From an operational perspective, you're right. Yeah.
Even though it's interesting now to see with EAC spinning out Match, we're getting more data on subs, even though it's, of course, a different genre of subs. But I think it's what we've seen in the last month, both with kind of the trading on Spotify shares, your IPO situation, Pandora coming down. So a lot of nervousness in the public markets around what is the sustainability of these subscription businesses on the internet. And I think it shows to me that the public investment audience is still new to them, even though I think we in the room are very comfortable about this model. I know that most Deezer users will probably use it for the rest of their lives. Same for Spotify, audio, and so on and so forth. But it's not really priced in, is it?
I think you're right. I think we all feel in the music industry that this is the most exciting time to be in right now. And yet, there's still a lot of belief in the market and the business model. And we're seeing in various markets, completely different phases of adoption and behavior of consumers and expectations. And I think the real potential. We started about 10 years ago. And we learned how to walk, and now we're walking at a fast pace, and I think we're going to be running in the next couple of years, and not only transforming existing music revenue, but also generating and growing the pie again.
Like Denise talked about earlier.
Right. We see that in emerging markets. Where you don't really have an established music industry, you don't have retail outlets that really have an infrastructure where you buy CDs, like traditionally. For instance, in Colombia, we launched with our partner Tigo 3 years ago, and the music industry, it's really more than double the last 3 years because it's a leapfrog from physical or non-downloads to streaming, and that's really what's exciting.
But it's an astounding success. The whole space of streaming. I think up here in the Nordics, people tend to be more familiar with the Spotify brands. It's really good to have you here and have people learn about the story. But you started in 2007, but now only a few years later. How many countries are you in today?
So we're live in more than 180 countries today.
How many users do you have in the 180 countries? Can you share that?
So we have more than 6.5 million subscribers that are paying for the service.
That's more than the whole size of Finland, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's growing. The good news, I think, is about this year. We're really seeing an accelerating trend in growth in a lot of core markets, for one. And then secondly, we have seen really that emerging markets, and this is what we're really excited about, in partnership, typically with mobile carriers, really start to evolve.
And I think the one thing that tends to be underestimated in the news is still, at least in my opinion, this is not so much a battle between the various streaming services. It's still mostly an education game of getting people to realize the beauty of streaming. I did a deal recently for rock science with Universal, and they told me that in the German market, so we're in the Western world, 70% plus is still CD sales. This sounds amazing to me.
Yeah,
comment on that.
It is hard to believe, especially
who buys a CD?
70%. Japan is like that. France actually is like that too. We have still a very strong portion of the market is based on CD sales. And it shows that, I mean, we came from the early adopter stage. It was technology providing a catalog, providing millions of tracks. Now we have to really educate the market that we're providing more than that, more value than just the catalog. I mean, we talked about, or we heard about playlists, curated content. We believe strongly in super serving each individual user, and it's about personalization. It's about delivering the right content, the right moment to each user at the time. So really picking from all that content that is out there, the right one for you in the moment, on the one hand. On the other hand, also is adding more value and increasing the content categories. I mean, we've added audiobooks, we've added sports, talk content that's very local as well.
But that curation is one hard nut to crack, though, isn't it? I mean, I've heard Daniel Ek talk about moods for different times of day. We saw Apple Music launch, and you made these spheres come together. But I, for instance, I mean, when I use Deezer or Spotify, my problem is my kids use it too, and they just listen to Katy Perry. So now Deezer and Spotify thinks I only want pop music. I mean, what do you see in 5 years' time and 10 years' time? How do you solve this?
Right.
Can it be solved? Is it solved by humans, solved by algo?
So our approach to this is, I mean, you're right. That's really the crux of value for the consumer, and it's based on your individual behavior and your individual preferences, but it's also based on the time of day and the context that you're in and your activity you're doing right now. So that's what, of course, makes it very, very complex. Also because you have, I mean, everybody listens to not just one type of music, but typically across a number of genres.
Exactly.
And we're adding more content, so it's going to get more and more complex even than that. So our approach is really to put a lot of the horsepower that we've put visibly on top of the hood, so to speak, underneath the hood. So make it very easy for the user with a one-click experience. We learn from the behavior over time, so that's the personal aspect. And then we inject curated playlists, curated mixes, and then we have our algorithms that provide like the Deezer flows, so it's a lean-back experience. It's a mix of that, and obviously data helps us evolve that, and we're at the beginning of that, really. Yeah. I mean, it's a continuous learning experience.
I mean, let's talk about data. I mean, because in a way, I mean, as a business, you're very valuable in the sense that 6 million plus paying subs and clearly growing and growing and growing. But maybe the most valuable and least understood part of a business like yours is all the data you collect, and still how underutilized this is by the labels and the artists themselves.
Absolutely. I think that's the biggest potential that we're just starting to tap into in the overall ecosystem of the music industry. And it's interesting because the conversations between us and the record labels and the artists have changed fundamentally over the last years. So we don't talk about the validity of music streaming. We talk about what can we do with the data to better market artists and to better serve the consumers. And I think that's really the key of it, that we collectively understand what the consumer wants and how we can better market artists.
Well, and you say that, and I want to believe that still mostly when I meet the label people, they still think offering a flight to the Oscars is like the way to win business. So it's a dinosaur world trying to understand data. Do you think in the next year or 2 and 3 it's going to be possible to get the labels to focus less on how to split the pie away from you and more on how to get data from you and get good value for the pie split at its current state?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a trend, and again, now music streaming is such an important part of the industry revenue that also within the record labels we feel that the digital department, but especially the streaming, the people that really look after the streaming market are much more heard and play a much different role than they did a year or 2 ago. And that's the beginning. That's how you make change happen. When the product managers at the labels, working with the artists, understands, okay, and connects the dots, and this is really how we can use data to better market our products, and we're getting there.
Let's talk about YouTube for a second. Let's talk about video. I mean, so kids today, young people, old people as well, I mean, use multi-screens, multi-entertainment at the same time, 30 plus hours of screen time a day because you double up, triple up, quadruple up. But it's always been a discussion that in the end, people will also want the video to go with the sound. I'm not sure this is the case, but what is the Deezer view on that?
Our view is that we are truly audio, And we believe in, our position is that we can provide the best experience when you use music, which is something you do while you do something else typically. And so the use case of video, is from our perspective, is very different from what you use audio for. And that's why we'd like to focus on audio.
Okay, so you will stick down that path.
Yeah.
And other areas of development that you foresee that will impress your consumers over the next 1-2 years, can you share some of that?
Yeah, so I think it's really the way we see it is understanding groups of users better and serving them in an easier way. So we call these like channels, and really have an experience that's both lean back as well as lean forward for people that are interested in a genre or in a particular content type or in a kind of mood, or there's a number of ways how you can cluster, and to really make it on the one hand simpler, personalized, and basically specifically to this group of people.
And do you feel that by and large, do you get across? Does the message come across? I mean, in different countries, in different regions, I mean, are people really getting streaming? Let's talk about the operators. You're using them as channels, so good and a bad in that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe mostly bad, but you probably can't admit to that. I mean, are there other ways to get to the consumer than through operators and in a way having that difficult relationship?
Yeah, and this is where the freemium model plays a big role. I mean, so there's two ways we distribute or how we reach the consumer. One is with the operators, because they have a conversation at the point of sale, which is a great story to tell. I mean, you buy a smartphone, you buy a tariff plan, you talk about value-added content. And the other way is freemium, where the barrier of entry for the consumer is so low that the product and the experience, and this is all that we're selling an experience, a new kind of way of listening to music, is understandable for the consumer once you're in the product. And so it's really fundamental that we maintain a free entry level for the consumer.
Well, I gotta say to the audience to round off, I think the user experience that Deezer offers is best on planet at the moment. It's a tough position to keep, but do plug on, and congrats to Gerrit and the team, right?
Well, thank you.